Well, good afternoon and an extremely warm welcome to each and every one of you. Hopefully it's sunny where you are. It was brilliant to see so many of you popping in the chat where you're from. I loved seeing that some of you from Gloucestershire, from Lincolnshire, from Cambridgeshire, from Italy even, and the centre of the universe, Peterborough, whoever it was who put that. You are all extremely welcome and thank you so much for your time in joining us. As you know, this seminar or webinar rather is called Edging into Hybrid Church, and we're so grateful for your time in joining us. I'm sure you, as for myself and my friends I'll introduce you to in just one moment, have been grappling and reeling at various points over the last year, just with all that this year has thrown at us amidst this global pandemic that we've found ourselves in, wading through, navigating, and still in the middle of, although thank God with the hope that we have, hopefully looking ahead to a post-COVID world at some point later in this year. But we're really grateful for your time. To introduce myself, my name is Rachel Heffer and I serve as Head of Mission at the Evangelical Alliance. I'll hand over to my friend Ben to introduce himself.
Yeah, it's really great to be here and to see so many of you who've dialed in for this webinar. My name's Ben Aldous and I am Principal Officer of Mission and Evangelism at Churches Together in England, and it's fantastic to be working alongside colleagues from other unity movements. I think we've recognised during this pandemic that we're called to work together in new ways, and this is part of that. I'll hand over to Rachel.
Hi, it's great to be with you. So I'm Rachel from Hope Together. And just so pleased to be with you. It's such a great topic and so glad to be doing it in partnership with Ben and Rachel.
Brilliant. So that's who we are, working in partnership together as Hope, as Church Together in England and the Evangelical Alliance. We're thrilled again to have you with us for this next hour and a bit or so as we navigate this topic of edging into hybrid church. The very fact that we had to wait those few minutes as many of you were pouring into this Zoom room with over about 500 people signed up to join us today shows that it's indicative of this time of this season, isn't it? That this is a hot topic, that whether you're a church leader, a ministry leader, whichever hat you wear today as you join us, we're now navigating the times, aren't we, into this period, as many have called, of rehabilitation. We've been through periods of reimagining, of rebooting, resetting, reassessing what it is that we're facing, what the church is and how the church is to respond, and asking of God, actually, what are you doing in this season? And in this process now of moving into rehabilitating as we edge back into the world at large, but also navigate what churches are to do. We're really glad that together, we really hope today that this will be a fueling, resourcing, encouraging, equipping, an interesting time together as we hear of some different people's experiences and really help you to, we hope, navigate where you're at in your context in a local church and look at some ideas for the way forward. We've been through these times together, haven't we, of actually looking at, as church leaders, and as leaders in different aspects of ministry, just actually seeking God as to what he wants for his church. And we know that this has been a really wearying time as well for so many. And so again, our hope is that actually as you hear the experiences of others, it might just trigger those ideas that you could see could work out in your context. That as you maybe look at how churches meet again in person, we hope to explore actually what it's given us in the online presence. As we know from many surveys that ourselves at the EA and others have conducted over the last year, many people have, praise God, come to faith, engaged in church, and are now sharing stories of how they found God in the online presence. And so part of what we're looking at now is actually how do we grapple with meeting again in person, but also potentially keeping some of the online, and how that can serve people on the fringe, those with disabilities, those who are unwell, those who are elderly, all those different brackets of people that you too may have seen have engaged well with the online presence of church and navigating just how we move forward together at this time. So we're called to be good news people in a bad news world, aren't we? And we really hope that today, actually, the good news that will come out of this will really help to resource you as you look to the way ahead. So we just want to start almost, before I hand over to Ben, to just say thank you on behalf of the church at large for all that you've been doing. We know that so many church leaders have been wrung out, strung out, knowing whether to meet or the church has been shut again. But as a church, we have done phenomenally well across the nations to just keep going, to keep steadfast, to keep seeking God, and to keep grappling with those in our community who really need to hear the gospel and to find faith. So as we look at how we move forward, I'll hand over to Ben, who's going to share a little bit about our programme of what we're going to hear today. Ben.
Yeah, it's really great to see so many of you gathered with us this afternoon, way beyond our initial expectations around attendance. And I think it's probably important to say at the outset of this webinar that we will not be able to cover every aspect of the complex landscape of hybrid church. But as the title of the webinar suggests, this is edging in, and it's a first offering from us and the beginning of a set of conversations going forward. We've already scheduled part 2 because there have been so many requests to come to this webinar, which will take place on Thursday, the 20th of May, which is 4 weeks time, 4 weeks today, between 2 and 3:30. And we already have 2 guests lined up. First, a speaker from a rural context in a multi-church benefice, with places where there's no power, no Wi-Fi. And secondly, a practitioner based in the capital working with digital natives. We also recognise that some of you with us today will have a vast amount of experience to bring to this conversation. So please do feel free to drop us an email and let us know some of what you have been doing. Some of you have already done that. This afternoon, we have 3 speakers from 2 UK spots and 1 in the US. First off is Joe Cox Starling, who will be sharing on the opportunities and the challenges for digital church. And there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. And we have Matt Smith, who is the online and resource development pastor from Bent Tree in Texas. So Matt's up early to be with us today. Matt is sharing lessons learned from 10 years of hybrid church. And finally, it's wonderful to have Adrian Samarini, who's a Baptist minister from Gamlingay in a rural context between Bedford and Cambridge. He'll be sharing some stories from the field, his experiences over the past year. Finally, because there's so many of us on the webinar today, we're likely to miss stuff, we're going to use Slido, which is an easy to use question and answer and polling app. I've got it here downloaded onto my phone. If you enter the code 995006, we'll put that in the chat. You can send us your questions, and Rachel, myself, and Steph, who's doing some of the technical stuff behind the scenes, will look at the questions, see which ones are proving to be most popular, and put them to our speakers. If you are struggling to find Slido in the App Store, you can simply just Google Slido, bring up the website, and put the code in. It's very straightforward. But before we go any further, let's pause and pray. And I'm using a prayer I've adapted from Barbara Glasson, who's the former president of the Methodist Conference. Let's pray together. Loving God, thank you for carrying your church through these months of discombobulation and dis-ease. If we are still tired, fortify our spirits. If we continue to be anxious, help us consider the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. For those of us struggling to adapt, bring us creativity and comfort. For those excelling and thriving in the virtual space, may we be encouraging and gracious to others. Help us always to hold fast to what is good, to see good in others, and remember that there is just one world, one hope, one everlasting love. In Jesus we make our prayer, the one who suffered, died, and was raised to new life, in whom we trust these days and all days. Amen. I'm handing over now to Rachel.
Great, thank you so much. Steph, would you share the screen? I'm going to do a really quick little statistic. So Steph is going to share that screen for me with some stats. Great. Basically, I want us to have a little look about what is some of the data saying. Next slide, please, Steph. We've been doing quite a lot of different people have been doing research at this time, looking into online church, what's happening, who's coming, what's happening in the population. And I wanted just to have a little look at what's happening with you're not speaking, could you mute yourself? please. That would be super helpful. That would help us a lot. We won't get so much background noise. Or great. So in 2002, I wanted to go right back to 2002 and just help go through the stats from there. In 2007, the Tear Fund did a report called Church Going in the UK, and they discovered that 15% of the population at that time were going to church regularly, which is once a month. And about 53% of the population were saying that they were Christian. I went all the way back to this just so that we could see what's happening now, if you like, because we'll get a trajectory. In 2017, we did mapping practicing Christians, and we discovered that about 10% of the population were regular churchgoers, 51% of the population said they were Christian. In fact, and 14% self-defined as active followers of Jesus. This just gives you roughly what we've done, and that's quite interesting because that's a 10-year period where we lost quite a lot of regular churchgoers. Can I have the next slide, please, Steph? Now, in what's happened during the pandemic? Sorry, we've gone for that salon. What happened during the pandemic? During the pandemic, quite a few different organisations and groups have done some research, including Hope Together in partnership with the Church of England and the Methodist Church. Early in, do you remember in May 2020, did you catch up on the Tear Fund research then that said that 24% of UK adults said they'd either watched or listened to a religious online presence of faith, a service during the pandemic? That's 24% of UK adults. That's a lot if you remember that regularly we normally have about 10%, and 14 are defining in 2018 as regular followers of Jesus. So we began to see something in May 2020 that looked unusual. And it was the beginning of the pandemic. And do you remember the beginning of pandemic? I mean, I know we're still all online at the same time, but there was quite a lot of excitement around online. You're like, oh, I'm going to an online webinar. Now we're thrilled you're all come, but we're not quite so excited about online as we were at the beginning of the pandemic. Codec did some more studies, again, a poll in June and July 2020. They discovered that half of the country's young adults aged between 18 and 34 said that they had, during the latter half of lockdown, that they'd regularly engaged in online faith-related activity. This included prayer and engagement with online worship. That's all adults, and therefore that's across all faiths. But that is a huge statistic. They're going back to examine the stats because it's such a big statistic. Half of the country's young adults aged 18 to 34 said in this piece of research that they were engaging online. That's just a huge phenomenon. So then we had a little look at this as well. We had a look in February to see how is the phenomenon carrying on? Was it disappearing? What's going on? We discovered that 23% of the adults in England said that they'd regularly engaged with online church over the last year. So again, that was coming at least once a month. If you remember the stats all the way back in 2007, we were getting 15% regular attendance, which had dropped to 10% by 2018. And therefore, this is a really fascinating figure, that because we were online, we were getting much bigger regular attendance of people online. And we know that people overstate their behaviours when they're doing polling sometimes, but it's still a massive proportion of the population. One of the key things I wanted to look at was joiners. Steph, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. What has been on the impact on the church? This is really the most important statistic out of everything I'm saying today. 4% of the population who identified as either Christian or no religion, okay, they had no religion. So we streamed out the other faiths because we felt that they were doing their own faith thing. So either they were Christian or of no religion, who previously didn't attend church, were attending online church regularly during lockdown. That is massive. It could be an overstatement, and but it's a huge missional opportunity. Even if they weren't coming as regularly as that they were stating that they had come, and a further 2% said they were coming in frequently. And again, 52% of this group, of these people who joined us online, were under the age of 35. And that is just such an opportunity. Last slide, Steph, before I hand over to Joe. So 35% of, then we looked at a few questions at why they came. Why did these people, particularly the younger ones who were non-religious, come along and join us. A lot of them, 35%, were wanting to connect, getting to know people. That there was a massive need to want to find people, have community. And 47% of them were more spiritual seekers. They wanted to know about God. They wanted to discover about the Christian faith. And so that's why they were coming to join us. And 13% of these joiners were those who were coming back who were Christians. So actually only 13% of that group were Christians coming back. That means we have, by going online during the pandemic, probably seen the biggest mission movement we could possibly have imagined, and it's had the biggest impact we could have imagined, with that huge group, 4% of the population, coming and experiencing and getting alongside and finding out more. So that is just huge. So if you remember, we've gone from about 15% in 2007, 10% in 2017, and we've seen this really big jump to 23% of the population at this time, of which 4% are those who had this 4% said they'd not come regularly to church before the pandemic. So they're a new group, and many of them weren't Christian. Fantastic opportunity. Joe, I'm going to hand on to you so that you can, if you like, come out of those stats and go into more of that. What is the opportunity for us? Thank you, Joe.
Can I introduce Joe to you before we do that, according to the programme?
Sorry.
That's fine. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Joe Cox Starling, who's our first guest speaker this afternoon. Joe is a minister based at Trinity Methodist Church in Codsall in Staffordshire. She's the chair of the Christian Inquiry Agency, the charity behind the website www.christianity.org.uk, and she is a BRF published author and a contributor to the recent Grove book on hybrid church. So, Joe, I know that you're passionate about engaging with the digital landscape, and you've got significant experience both practically and reflecting theologically. So we're really grateful that you could be with us this afternoon. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ben and Rachel for hosting this space. In the face of a global pandemic, faced with the statistics that Rachel has already shared with us, I'm really grateful to you for taking the opportunity to help us as ordinary church leaders take some bold steps towards enabling more and more people to hear about Jesus. And for those of us in full-time Christian ministry, the opportunity to stay sane and healthy with all of the challenges and changes that we're facing as well. So I'm a Methodist minister. I have an oversight of a number of churches and buildings and congregations and people. And most of the people that I spend my time with are over the age of 70. Roughly a third of them have been online every week. A third of them use email, but never Zoom. And about a third of them I would describe as digitally ambivalent. It's slightly different to being digitally poverty because we've been able to resource those who are in digital poverty. But there are a third of people who won't go near technology. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on hybrid church, but I am a practical theologian who wants to get the best out of every opportunity because I see that's where the kingdom of God is growing. So I want us to start with the miracles of Jesus. It may seem strange, but stick with me. From Simon's mother-in-law to the man lowered through a roof by his friends, the healing miracles of Jesus see people encounter Jesus, which enables them to firstly be fully themselves, to discover embodiment. Secondly, to participate fully in society, to be connected. And thirdly, enabling them to experience something of the power and love of God. Jesus' response to their ability to see beyond being distant and isolated is to bring the person back to themselves, back to their body, back to wider society, and to make sure that they leave knowing that they are loved by God. As we are in the midst of a global pandemic, Trauma studies offers us the same pattern for survival and for rebuilding, reminding us that our key tasks are to be embodied people. What is going on in our bodies? We need to take notice of the things which are triggering us or making us less than we can be. That secondly, we are connected people, that we are creatures created for community by the creative gods. We are connected, and yet this is the very thing which is taken away from us in a pandemic, when we have to wear masks and stay 2 meters away from people and we can't see the grandparents for several weeks. And we are faithful and spiritual people, part of something bigger, even when we don't have all the answers and the solutions. So hybrid church speaks out of and works within this experience of being isolated, distanced, and excluded. At the heart of our work in hybrid church, we need to recognise that this is not new. We're making the mainstream normal. But we need to recognise that we are standing in the footsteps and on the shoulders of giants and prophets and pioneers who have been doing this for over a decade. Most especially with communities of people who have been unable to access worship through chronic illness, disability, pain, medication, infirmity, old age, or vulnerability. Precisely why we started with the miracles of Jesus. We are indebted to the work of people such as Katie Tupling, Laura Neal, Tanya Marlowe, the late Bex Lewis, and Emma Major, who have developed a theology of illness and disability which learns from those who cannot access our buildings and our communities, and yet enables them to be fully embodied, fully connected, worshipping disciples of Jesus. At best, hybrid church is not about doing Sunday morning online. Hybrid church, instead, is about finding a way to be radically inclusive to those who are socially isolated, physically distanced, living with acute illness, and enabling them to meet with Jesus. It's about noticing that even in the midst of a global pandemic, our bodies are keeping the score of the micro traumas that we are living with. Every time a new piece of guidance is published or a headline changes our perception of what's happening, everything that we offer there needs space to help us be whole again in our own bodies. And hybrid church is about making missional connections outside of the margins that we would normally draw, realizing that, in the words of John Wesley, the world is our parish, and that we can connect in so many more ways with so many more people, reaching them in body, mind, and spirit too. When Jesus healed people, he brought them back to be embodied, connected, and spirit-witnessed lives. Trauma studies tell us that we need spaces to become embodied again, connected and faithful, if we are even to survive. Hybrid church, at its best, responds to these challenges, providing radically inclusive spaces on and offline for people to be embodied, connected, and discipled. Many of us started this time last year stumbling into online church. Perhaps it was because we wanted worship to keep going in some form or other, and we've just learnt on the job as we've gone along. Some of us did it because we saw everybody else do it and thought we'd better get in on the act. Some of us did it because we didn't know how to respond to a pandemic. We'd never been taught that in college. And so doing something online gave us a sense of purpose. For some of us, it made us look busy to people that thought we didn't do anything anyway. As the world fell apart, some of us started doing online church because we still wanted to be present for our people. We needed to do something that felt meaningful. For some of us, we just wanted to keep it going in case people got out of the habit of going to church and we turned back up this year with no congregations. And some of us started hybrid church because mission has always been about stretching into the margins. What I'd like us to be encouraged to do is to understand that the practice of hybrid church isn't limited to a conversation about doing church online. What instead would happen if our starting question is, how can we provide a radically inclusive opportunities, spaces and engagements which enable people to have agency, to be fully themselves, fully engaged in community and known by God? For us, in my context, this means that we are now committed to offering something online and offline in everything we do. Broadly speaking, when we do something offline, we work out how to achieve the same aims on, and vice versa. When we do something online, we try and achieve the same aims offline too. It means that we have to be really clear about why we're doing something and what we'd like the impact to be, rather than just getting on and doing stuff in duplicate. And so, as I come to the end of my few minutes with you, I wanted to offer 2 examples which perhaps put this into some context for you. Firstly, a few weeks ago, our Easter Sunday service. For us, in one of my communities, this was the first time we have opened our doors in over a year. Our first attempt at being an open building for worship. So our aim was to provide an Easter Sunday worship experience for as many people in our congregation as possible. So in church, I led a short face-to-face service. I preached a sermon using a projector screen with some visual images. We had some pieces of music which we streamed online, and the congregation had set prayers that we'd written specifically for the day, which they could say together behind their masks. Online, I'd pre-recorded the same sermon, and a small group of volunteers then led people through an online service, streaming more music from YouTube, producing some locally sourced music that they had prepared themselves, and having a breakout space after our service where people could have conversation and fellowship. The order of service itself was emailed out to anyone who was on our mailing list a few days before Easter Sunday, and we also printed that order of service and hand-delivered them to households that don't have the internet. Finally, the sermon recording was then uploaded to Facebook and YouTube for anybody to watch in their own time. A simple model of hybrid church, using some of the same resourcing, but doing it using different media. But something slightly different as my second example, something that offers a stretch into these missional margins that hybrid church invites us to. At Christmas, we wanted our community to be and to see angels. And so we offered an embodied, connected and discipled model to enable people to do that. To be embodied, we commissioned a street artist to produce 5 8-foot square winged murals of angels based on the angelic encounters in the Nativity story. These were hung on a local business, the district council, a local pub, a local school, and our church. And people were invited to go and stand in these giant angel wings as they embodied themselves what it was to be an angel. A local running club realised that there was about 5 kilometres between the routes, and so they created a Strava route for those doing couch to 5K, and at Christmas donned angel wings and halos and ran a Christmas angel run for us on a 5K route. In terms of being connected, we produced a social media campaign with 31 ways to be kind in December, 1 a day, posted on social media. We invited people to tell stories about where they had seen angels. And again, we did a vox pop for the online community on Facebook. We invited people to post photos of the most weird angel that they could find in their Christmas decorations. And we invited families to produce and bake angel-shaped biscuits to give to their neighbours. In terms of being discipled, we then had a sermon series about the angelic encounters in the Nativity book or story. We provided assemblies for the local schools, where local school children wrote stories about angels and drew pictures, and where their assemblies enabled them to be kind during Christmas. And we printed a booklet which told the story of the angelic encounters in the Christmas narratives, as well as artist notes telling their perspective as to why they had drawn the angels as they had. And this was then sent free of charge to local schools, to care homes, and to the local housebound people who were getting a Christmas dinner delivered from a local cafe. Two very different examples of how hybrid church can enable people to be embodied, connected, and discipled together. So for me, hybrid church is about radical inclusivity. Hybrid church takes your context seriously. Hybrid church extends your practice and understanding to reach into and beyond your missional margins. Hybrid church is as much about the days when Zoom crashes, when people forget to mute or unmute, and when the kids walk in and scream just as you're finishing the video, as when it goes well. Hybrid church is enabling all of the voices and people that you see on the screen to take part, to enable them to be embodied and connected and fully participative in worship in ways that they have been prevented from doing for all sorts of different reasons. And hybrid church is not necessarily the same as digital church. Mark 2:17 says, Jesus said to them, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill. I've not come to those who get it, but to those who need it the most."
Jo, thanks so much for sharing so richly. I'm still trying to take it all in and consider aspects of it, but particularly for me, what I really enjoyed were these practical examples at the end, and I know as part in a small way of your Christmas Angels stuff, and particularly those missional opportunities and the creative ways of engaging with your community. I love the 5K running between the different angels. That was really great. We've got some questions. We're going to have some other speakers in this webinar. So what I'm going to do is there are kind of two that seem to be the most, it will work on a desktop, yeah, the most, be given the most likes. The first one is, how do you do hybrid church for those both on site and those watching online simultaneously? And how do you ensure either group isn't excluded from feeling engaged? If you'd like to take a shot at answering that.
I suspect that Matt and Adrian are going to do a better job than I can at answering that. My hunch at the moment would be that actually we're still trying to work it out. I think for many of us, we're still trying to work out how to do both simultaneously and how to do things that enable people to participate, which is really difficult when you can't sing and when you can't actually be any closer than 2 meters to each other. So I think that there are significant challenges that our current lockdown restrictions bring, which actually in a non-COVID world would be more easy to see around, because you could use different facilitation skills and different technologies. But my suggestion really is to leave that until Adrian and Matt have spoken, because I think we may get closer towards the end, if you don't mind.
No, I think you're right. That was the top question, so I thought I'd give you a chance to answer it.
I'll avoid it, it's fine.
Now, our second one that's in the ratings to 10 likes is, how do we support those who have no internet and who are completely unable to attend church? And you were obviously alluding to some of that and giving us give us a little reflection on that.
Digital poverty is so significant in a number of our locations, and that may be because of rural provision, or it may be of economic necessity. So again, it's working out why people have no internet, which then helps you get to supporting people. We have made sure that every member of our congregation has access to the order of service, either in paper form. We've got a phone line, we upload to YouTube, so we try and keep everything multimedia on our delivery of worship, and some of our mission activities as well. I have to say that there are a few people who are just belligerent. And actually we have to let adults be adults, and there are some people that won't get online whether you try them or not. Although my 95-year-old went out and bought an iPad and has taught herself how to engage online. So I think that for some people, actually it's making sure that they've got the right technology and that they've got the support in place to be able to engage. So we have tried to put in place some training days to build people's confidence. And as a leader, actually just practicing a non-anxious presence. Actually, sometimes things will go wrong, and it's taken us all time to get to grips with Zoom or Teams or Slido or whatever it is. And actually, that's just fine. There are going to be days where things just don't work out, and we have to be able to practice that as well. So a team of people to support. If your churches can provide Kindles or Amazon Fires and stuff, that actually there's a way of resourcing people pretty cheaply, or using second-hand computers. I know that we did that for our local schools when they needed extra provision when the schools locked down, possibly more than our congregations. Let adults be adults. Some people are just going to not get it at all. And if there is a kind of infrastructure issue, then that becomes a social justice campaign that you can then work with more strategically when lockdown is over, and when councils can be lobbied for greater super fast broadband would be a starting place, I think.
Joe, thanks so much. I really like your phrase, being a non-anxious presence. I think that's a really important part of embodying who Jesus is in these days and these strange times. Thank you so much. I think I'm not going to give you any more questions. I'm going to hand over to one of the Rachels. I can't remember which one. But yeah, thank you so much for being with us. And I think there'll be some people who would like to have a copy of what you said. So if you don't mind, it's being recorded, but some people might like an actual physical copy of it. So maybe we can send that out via email. Course. Thanks so much, Joe.
No, with pleasure. Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you so much. Next up would be Matt Smith. I'm just checking Matt isn't there. I keep Googling participants. I think that's I've done probably an American time zone thing. So I think he's probably going to turn up about 8 o'clock tonight. And but don't worry, because we actually have pre-recorded an interview with Matt. So we're going to show you that, which does include Matt's top tips and what he's learned from 10 years of being an internet pastor. So they have a church and they also have Matt, who is the internet pastor, and he's been doing hybrid for 10 years. So I thought he was a good person to ask some questions of. As a result of the church in the UK going online, we've discovered that 23% of the population have been joining us online. 4% have been new people who were not going to church beforehand, which is massive mission opportunity. Amazing. So we want the church to stay online. So we've got to do this new thing called hybrid. And so we're introducing Matt Smith, who has been doing hybrid church for... Hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Where are you again in the world, Matt?
We're in North Dallas, so Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas.
You know something about
County.
Dallas.
Wow, I'm a Dallas boy, man. Good to see you.
And Matt, how long have you been doing hybrid church? And is it always been in the States? Has it been elsewhere? How's this journey begun? And what is your official title?
Yeah.
That's great. My title is Online and Resource Development Pastor. And this all started because Pete Briscoe was our senior pastor, and people were interested in what he was teaching. And so we started to hear from people that they were wondering, what church he was with and all that. And we just started, honestly, it may have been a little more than 10 years ago, but we just started putting our services online, and we didn't advertise it a whole lot. We just were putting it there for anybody to have it. And we started getting contacted from folks all over the world that were listening and wondering what to do next. And we realized it's poor stewardship, really, to put the content out there without any way of actually connecting with people and walking with them. And what we were seeing is that God was at work in people's lives, even though they could never come to our campus. He was using Bent Tree as the church, and he was using Bent Tree to reach people, to share his love and life with them. And so as far as like our regular people that would be coming on a regular basis in the States, we had really the coasts, so the West Coast and the East Coast, and then we had a pocket in the Midwest, outside of Texas. That's where we...
I'm just thinking, you want to say something? Because I'm just wondering whether the online church are turning to a cell church. Are they turning to a cell or campus church?
Yeah, we actually we called them microsites, which got confusing because in the tech world, a microsite is a web page, a part of a web page. But for some reason, we started calling them microsites, and they're just small cell churches, basically. And we would have a loose relationship with them. So it was, they could function how they felt they needed to in their context, but we would provide the teaching and worship. And then I was their contact for the leaders of that microsite or the cell church. And I would connect with them and help them kind of in the ministry that they had. But really it was equipping them to do ministry in their neighborhood, in their town. And so we had people that would meet, and they rented like a city center, in a small town. We had people that met in homes and neighborhoods. We even had college students that were away at university, and they would just have their dorm room or a common area in their dorms where they would have church.
And so from like maybe one person who'd get plugged in and find you and find out about what was going on, they were sort of gathering people around them, but staying connected. So we've had people say, oh, what we don't want is pajama church. What we don't want is to make church just so easy for everyone, that all they have to do is sort of stumble out of bed on a Sunday morning, sit there in their pajamas, and that's it for faith development. How have you used online to take people from just a consumer and helped them to go on that journey to become a disciple in a micro mini church?
In America, we like to consume things. So breaking the consumer mold is a challenge. You know, honestly, before we got to the place of figuring out how to equip people and help them activate their faith in a way of where they're sharing it and all of that, it was really a turning point in my own mind of what online ministry is and what it looks like to be able to really share the gospel and help people. And so God started to do a shift for me where I realized even if they're in their pajamas, the fact that they would wake up and actually choose to attend is an act of faith. So it was for me to be able to recognize God's at work in their life, because you could easily wake up and go about your day like a normal day. But instead, for some reason, God's doing something in your life where you would wake up and say, I want to click on this church service to be a part of it in some way. And to me, it was a shift of they're not just consuming, they're actually taking a step of faith. And that was a fundamental shift for me to really think about. And then as a church, everything we do, if it's not online, is predominantly you come to us. You come on our timetable, you come to our place, and you're the guest. And what we're actually then now doing with online is saying, we want to be the guest in your home. And if you would invite us in, we'd be so honored. And so it's a very different shift. We want to come to you because we care that much about you, that we'll meet you where you are when you're ready. And then we can begin a relationship that way.
Yeah, the question most church leaders will be asking now as we bring this to a close will be, will there be any resource or any help or anything you have prepared over a period of time that could help those who wants to balance the hybrid? Is there anything at all?
What really helps is a different mindset to see that it's not a competition to the physical, that everyone lives in a hybrid space. Even like you two are physically in person and you're also digitally connecting with me. And this is what we do all the time. We are no longer this segmented, it's all meshed together. And so for the church to be able to meet people in that same space is a win. And, you know, I love the statistics that you were sharing, and really it's people are both physical and digital in their lives. So awesome. If the church can meet them in that place, that's a beautiful thing. For our Sunday services, we've gone around, you know, do we do things special just for the online? Do we create a whole new service? And during the pandemic, when we were shut down, we experimented with, well, let's structure the services differently. In fact, we shortened our services because we realized the majority of people are not consuming digital content at an hour and a half span of time. And so we shortened all of the segments and we kind of made it where it fit more inside of an hour. Awesome. But we also changed our terminology. So it's not, you know, you're watching with us, you're worshiping with us. And so in every way that we're communicating, we're wanting to say, we don't see you as a consumer. We see you as a part of
the party. Yeah. That's awesome.
Great. Even that language switch is great.
It's awesome.
And when people come online, when you're back in the building, I seem to remember you were saying about you've got a whole team that greet online. You meet people online. So you're actually you've shaped a hybrid experience. So you work as hard on what people experience online as what they experience offline.
Yes. So it's really interesting because, you know, normally if you're walking into a church, you would say like, let's not talk so that we can pay attention. But when you're online, we found it actually helps people engage more if you have a chat going. And so some people, you know, prefer just to go big full screen and they worship that way. Others really want to engage in a conversation and you feel like you're with one another. And there's actually a free platform that we use. I'll send to you guys. It's a wonderful resource. A church actually made it and then just gives it to any church that wants to use it. Wow. And it's a way for you to have it on your webpage where you have a chat on your site so that you don't have to worry about being muted by Facebook or YouTube or anything like that. You can actually have it all housed right there.
And do you have any favourite stories of what's happened because your church has been online for a long time? Do you have any favourite story that you could share with us?
You know, one of the things that has stood out the most, when we do mission moments, so we have time for our missions pastor to come and share what God's doing around the world through our mission partners and opportunities for people to engage. And so he and I started meeting with, well, how can, anytime we share that on campus, how can we have something specific for the online community? And so we've done a variety of ways to try to help them see they could live out their faith in their context, even if they never come to our church physically. But, and so we've had special moments where it's, you sign up to be an English teacher for kids who are trying to learn to speak English, and it's all through Zoom, you know, things like that. But the coolest part of this is we were doing a trip for students, and we had students who couldn't afford to go. So it just told the story, and we started getting checks sent in from all over that they heard it, they were moved by it, and they wanted to be a part of what God was doing in the lives of these students. And so that was a really cool thing to see. They're just as much a part of what we're doing as the people who are sitting in the chairs. Yes. And then the wording that they used was very similar. It was the wording we use. So they've been with us enough to catch the phrases, to know the way that we kind of articulate things. Yeah. it was just like, you're a bent tree, or you're one of us. And but we've never seen you.
Yeah, so part of church family, wherever they are, you've multiplied and grown your church family, and you've seen people's faith develop, and it's all because you've been online. And if you had a final pitch, if there's a church leader out there who's just like, this is too much faff, I just want to switch this off, and let's get back to the building and get back to that, what would be your final pitch to them?
I guess it would be, it's worth it. You know, it can feel daunting, and there's a whole lot of technical components to it, but you're already online. To take a step back may feel like it's a relief, but it actually will be the thing that begins to be a burden for you, because you know that God is at work, and he's actually doing something bigger than what's in your space. And he wants to use you. He is using you, and he wants to continue using you beyond the walls of the church, because there are people who are longing to know, and they don't even know that's what they're longing for. There are people who want to be intimately acquainted with their Savior, and he's actually going to use the technological world to bring the gospel of light and life to people. And he's going to use all of us. And so it's a beautiful thing to see that it takes our small campuses and it just blasts open the walls and says, this is the kingdom of God at work, and he's on the move. And so let's continue on together, because it's a beautiful journey to see people who may never step foot in a church find life in Christ.
Thanks, Matt.
Amen. Fantastic.
Thanks. It's really great to have you with us. I'm sure many leaders who are watching this will find comfort and courage to continue with a hybrid church.
Ken, hi.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Hello to everyone. Ken, you are the missions pastor at Bentry.
That's correct.
Matt, we just watched you, and here you are. But that's great. We've now got Ken and Matt. I'm so sorry. We didn't recognize you. I kept on going in the thing. Are you there?
Well, it's all good.
That's good. We just watched you. So that's a good start. Now we can ask you some questions.
Yeah.
One question that we've got here is, how do you do hybrid church at the same time as doing online church? How have you made that work? Because you obviously, maybe Ken's more focused on the people in the room. Matt, you're not. What have you had to do to make that work?
That's a great question. And we've tried a couple different things. So originally it was, we just did our normal services, and we provided that online as a live stream. And so you just joined in what was happening on our campus. And what we have experimented with during the whole pandemic life was a completely redone service that was shorter. It was tailored to the online community because everybody was online, and everything was shortened. So we went from an hour and 15-minute services to almost 45-minute services. Everything got hacked. And it was really because we saw people weren't really engaging very long. Then what we've begun doing now is we have a service that is designed specifically for the online community. It's back up to an hour. And the main shift is where the cameras are. So they're in closer. And it's a service where we invite a small group of people. So it's really the leaders and the servants who serve during our physical campus service. They're invited to come early for this service that we stream online. And so there are a few people in the room, but the cameras are up close, and it's a more intimate feel that way. And then we have, so that's at 9 o'clock. And then at 10:30, we have a service that's on campus.
And have you, the whole idea of microsites, so you've got your church and then you've got mini churches, like how have microsites formed? How many people are in them? And how have you connected them?
So with microsites, our view is you have to have intentionality. So if somebody reaches out and they're wanting to do it, potentially you could start it with 2 people. If you have 2 people that are wanting to intentionally do this, it really kind of goes from 5 to 100. Once you get to 100, we start talking about maybe there's a campus that would come out of that if that's a model that your organization would do. So the way they get connected is they start using our resources. They, for some reason, are connected with us through the live stream, or they've done a study that we've done, or word of mouth, where somebody that is at our church is connected with them, family or friends. And then they just look in their community, and is there a need in their area? And so we have one in Wisconsin that they struggled with finding a place. There was a very different church culture there, and a very struggling culture as well. And so they started renting a community center and meeting there. We had one on a college campus that met in a dorm room, and another at a college campus that met in someone's home in the town that just wanted to encourage college students. And so for college students, we actually encouraged, think of this as when you kind of a primer for what could this lead into for you as an adult, planting churches or just being intentional in your faith to live out that way.
Great. And we had a question in Slido about the global church. Do you know anything about what's happening globally online? I think you do work in some other countries globally, don't you?
Yeah, and in fact, that's where Ken and I have a great partnership just in ministry and life, because he's actually been doing church online in a way a lot longer than me in mission work. And so we have a lot of conversations through that. And Ken, if you have anything you'd like to jump in on that.
Sure. So a lot of what we've seen is countries like Iran has been doing this for 20 years. And really that's because that's their only option so far because of persecution there. And so they've made this into a tool where it's not just something people watch, but it is intended for them. It's church for them. So they do some very creative things that we've really tried to emulate over time, especially since the pandemic set in. To help people understand they're not just watching a service, but they are part of the church. They are part of the service. And so people from inside the country, for example, they can't show their faces, but they can call in and read scripture during the service. People in the diaspora who are actually, there's quite a few there in England and in surrounding countries there who can show their faces, who will help to lead communion or do various other things. So they're participating in ways that help the online community not just feel like they're just a one-off, just spectators in that. So that's a beautiful way for the church to feel like the church. So that's the global church has been ahead of us in many ways in this, especially in the persecuted areas where they don't have another choice. But the ramifications of those things and the practices are solid, and they're really good, especially for those who are seekers and really don't want to set foot into a church, and they want to toe dip and have an experience where they can try it on, so to speak. Or for others who are homebound and really they're not able to get to those places, or they're just not in the vicinity or in a place where there's a good church around. So there's many things that happen on a global in a global arena that have given us great ideas.
Ken, Matt, thank you so much for being with us. Matt, I'm so sorry I didn't work out what your name was from your iPad, but we watched you do a fantastic talk. So, so that was great, and we're so grateful that you were with us. We're going to do another hybrid webinar in another time because it's been so popular, and we do want to skill up. Great. We do want to skill up the church on this, and there are so many questions we could ask, but we haven't got time for them all today. So thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to hand over to the other Rachel now, who's going to chat to Adrian.
Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much again, Matt and Ken as well. Great to have you. So we've heard so far from Joe looking at all of those digital and hybrid church opportunities. Brilliant to then scoot across the pond to hear from Matt and from Ken. But I'm really thrilled to introduce you now to Adrian Samarin, who's back over here. And Adrian is Baptist minister of Gamlingay Baptist Church, which is in rural Cambridgeshire, not far from where I live here in Ely. Adrian, great to have you with us. Now, people might confuse you as being from Dallas because you've got a little bit of an accent. So
yeah, they will. So I'll start off by saying I am British. I don't sound it necessarily, although according to all my American friends, I sound British, and according to my British friends, I sound American. So I'm kind of lost and confused in the middle, I guess. But yeah, no, thank you so much for having me today. It's a real privilege to join, and great to hear from Matt and Joe, and just amazing stuff on what's going on. And I'm loving the questions as well. I've been watching the chat and all the different things happening in terms of some awesome thinking going on. So it's great to be here with that.
Absolutely. Well, Adrian, I'm going to hand to you in just a moment, but just as you said about questions, please, as you listen to Adrian over the next few minutes, we'll be wrapping up by 3:30, but please do use the Slido app or the chat, but use the app to put your questions in. We'll have a few minutes to ask those of Adrian. But Adrian, bringing it right back to UK, like you said, rural environment that you're in, love to hear of your experiences. I'm sure many might relate to, actually, as a local church minister. The journey that you've been on over the last year, the ups and downs, the ins and outs of meeting, not meeting, looking at online. It'd be really helpful for us to just hear a little of your experiences, some of the lessons learned. And again, at this point in time, edging in, what does it look like for you sort of moving forward? So tell us a little bit about your story. I'm really grateful to hear that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to take it back, if possible, to when I joined the church, just briefly, about 4.5 years ago. So I came into a very traditional rural context as a younger pastor, kind of different in many respects. It didn't make sense for many people why, we felt called here, why God had called us. And tech wise, when we joined the church, it had a somewhat broken projector screen and projector. It wasn't very technologically advanced in any way, shape, or form. And that might be something that many of you watching can relate to, actually having very limited tech feel. I am a bit techie in myself. So when incoming, I kind of said, well, I'm going to use that projector and screen every week because I want to be able to create visual things. I believe that even in our learning environments are different, and how we learn is going to be different. So for some people, you want to see it, not just hear it, and things like that. So stepping into that, when up until lockdown last year, that is all we had. We didn't have a website when I first joined, and I very much felt like, hey, actually, we need to be able to connect with people. We have a beautiful grade 2 listed building, over 300 years old. But what we found is that actually for people coming into the church, you have to kind of build up your courage. For many of us, if we've grown up in the church or if we're Christians already, stepping into church is maybe not a big deal. Perhaps we're looking for a new church and there's a bit of nerves into connecting with the new community. But hey, church is where God's people are there. They're going to love, so we're okay to enter. But our church has a really long drive at the front and a really long drive at the back. There's no easy way to get in. And once you decide to kind of cross the threshold of that gate, you then walk down the drive and then walk into double doors, and then you're faced by a wall, essentially, where you have to go either right or left. So there's a lot of kind of building up. There's very little open access to our church. So already for us, we were facing the how do we invite people in, and very much saying how do we stop trying to get people in the door and start focusing our vision outwards to say, hey, how can we connect with people? And part of that for me was say, well, we do want to welcome people in, but they want to be able to see it. So let's start a website. Let's get onto Facebook. And early on, that was very much about just advertising, almost sharing who we are. So there was pictures and there was, that kind of stuff. And we started recording our Sunday sermons. Really, basically, to start with, it was just on my phone. My phone would sit on the pulpit. I would open up voice recorder and, cut it down and then put that on the website. That's all we had. But with the idea that people could hear and they could connect. And if they missed a Sunday, you could listen back and things like that. Fast forward to lockdown, we've had people join us up until lockdown. And so our systems advanced a little bit. Our audio was improved. One of the members came in and he had his own kind of kit, which he very amazingly blessed and said, hey, you can use our speakers and you can use this. And we advanced a bit. But then coming to lockdown, we kind of went, well, what do we do? And as I said, I'm a bit techie. So I said, well, I'm going to film something on camera and we'll record it and we'll edit it. So from the first Sunday, we started having pre-recorded services that were, as has been shared, shorter. We automatically, kind of felt that we're not going to be able to engage with much on that. We don't want to force people to stare at a screen. And we reduced them and put them on. And then we found our groove. So we suddenly found that, we had some those that would lead worship. It was either on acoustic guitar or on keys, and they would film themselves and I would film myself doing a talk. We would piece it together and we would put it up online. And that forced us to start a YouTube, and that forced us to use our Facebook page for more than just advertising maybe the events that we were doing in the community. Our village has 3 different Facebook pages. So prior to that, we used Facebook just to advertise. We'd say, hey, come join us for this thing or that thing, and never really did much about Sunday services. It was more of like the community events that we might be doing. And so we started very quickly utilizing these things, going, well, we have a YouTube. Even as a millennial, I don't have my own YouTube channel that I really have up and running or anything like that. So even just things of, well, what is the best way to get it? And for us, it was just about providing a space where our church members could watch, they could connect with us. And that's where we started. And in many respects, kind of where we still are. But we saw questions being asked suddenly of, everybody's like, oh, the church is closed. The church is closed. But pushing back on that, we recognized that the church wasn't closed. The building was closed, but we are the church. And that raised the question of what is church? And so we as a church entered into a series where some would say boldly, some would say stupidly, perhaps, just got onto emails and started emailing some local friends that are pastors from different contexts, but some others that, Mike Pilavacci, pastor from Texas, it was just across the board, inviting people who could speak into their context of what they're seeing God saying and do from different denominations. So not all Baptist, some Anglican, some Pentecostal. And we simply asked the question, what is church? And from that, the thing that was most blatantly obvious to us was that church was not coming in on a Sunday morning. Even though we desire and we crave and we long for that relational aspect of church community, the church is the people. The church is how we gather. And it started making us ask questions. Well, can we gather online? Well, we have to right now, but can we beyond this gather online? And there are plenty of studies across the board in terms of like online gaming and things like that. And there's some really interesting statistics about how for some gaming, which I have to say, I'm not a gamer. I don't do any of it. But for some, gaming is their community. They are connecting, they are interacting, they are spending so much time online because they have found friendships, they have found people that they are connecting with, they have formed community. And that made us start thinking, well, hold on a second, that's part of what we want to do. We want to create opportunity and space for people to be in community, but we want to have Jesus at the center of that. So how can we do that? And so we kept on doing things on a Sunday morning online. We invested into Zoom, as most churches have. And I remember there was a Sunday where Zoom crashed, and that was a big thing for us because we do our teas and coffees after a Sunday service on Zoom. And so we weren't able to connect in any way, shape, or form with each other. And I thought I'd done something wrong. It was all sorts of what's going on. But it was because the church said, hey, we're going to connect in community. We want to do it. And so part of the journey for us was asking those questions and exploring what it looked like. And one of the guests I had was, I was really fortunate to have, is a guy by the name of Brady Shearer, who's the founder of an organization, a company called Pro Church Tools. And some of you may have heard of it if you've done some of the kind of church media research. He's got a YouTube channel. And one of the things I was really intrigued about asking him and talking to him about was they are very adamant about social media, the social world, not being about advertising, but about community. And so we had this conversation about, well, how do you create community? What is the tipping point? What does it make it different about actually using Facebook and YouTube and Instagram to create community? And he said it's about interaction. It's about engaging. It's about recognizing that you're not just trying to get them to come to you, but you're saying, hey, I'm going to go to where you are and connect with you there. And that changed not just my mindset, but the mindset of those in the church to kind of say, well, hold on, how can we do that? And so now when we post things on Facebook, they're not, hey, come to this event or come to this service. They are sometimes simply, hey, we're going to spend a minute praying. How can we pray for you? And we've seen that over the last year, our local community, beyond anybody else, but our local community as well as others, I guess, have interacted with that. And we've seen people start jumping onto our services that we've never connected with in the flesh. Some people that I know, for example, that would never step foot in through our doors, but they suddenly pop up on a Sunday morning service, or they're responding to some of these questions, or they're asking for prayer. And so suddenly we recognize that this is greater and bigger than just a bit of a stopgap. And so then we started thinking, well, what's it going to look like? And we asked the question, I guess, of ourselves, maybe rather hopefully, what does it look like when we come out of lockdown a few months ago, like months and months ago, thinking, hey, it's not here yet, but what will it look like? And one of the things that we found was that we want to be able to live stream our service on a Sunday. So step away from the pre-recording and do a live stream so that actually we can connect. And I was really worried about bringing that to the church. So as a Baptist church, we are members led and we make decisions as a membership. And I really thought we were going to have a really heated, difficult conversation in stepping into it. But when we brought it to the as a leadership team, when we brought it to the membership, it was unanimously passed to actually invest some money in buying a decent camera, in buying some of the kit that we needed to be able to live stream. And one of the comments from one of the members, which when she said this, I kind of went, well, I wish I would have said that. It would have been the best way to describe what we're doing, because she said, actually, the way I see it, this is the biggest missional investment, missional expansion that we could ever do as a church, because we're not just expanding our building, but we're actually stepping into anyone's home who welcomes us. And that for the room, again, the Zoom room, because we were meeting on Zoom, was like a bit of a mic drop moment. Everyone across the age, and some of our eldest members in their 90s turned around and said, yes, we are expanding the church. So suddenly someone's lounge, someone's garden, someone's kitchen becomes part of Gamlingay Baptist Church as they tune in with us. And so that is kind of where we decided to then invest of. So at the moment, every Sunday morning, there's a small group of us, perhaps someone who's leading worship, although sometimes we still do some of it pre-recorded, but we've tried to make that as live as possible. Someone running a laptop and some tech stuff, and then myself. Now, I would love to tell you that I, did this all by myself and I came in and I figured it out. Not at all. I stepped into this going, we need a camera. What else? But when others in the church realized what we were doing, they started saying, well, hey, can I do some research? Can I jump in to figure out what gear we need, what this and the other? And off their own desire, their own, I guess, God-given prompting to be a part, started doing the research about the kit that we need, the cameras that we need, the cabling that we need, and have done it all, have built YouTube is the greatest university you could ever have for some of this stuff, because there's answers across the board. And so they figured that all out and like put it all together. We got a team of people, socially distanced, I say team, 3 or 4, to be able to do this bit and that bit. And one person in particular really took lead on making it all happen. And so for me, that wasn't something, as the person kind of leading on this, at first I was like, I don't have the scope to do this. I don't have the knowledge for all of this. How am I going to do it? But right there in the midst of our congregation, of our fellowship, there was someone who was there ready for it. In addition to that, one of my good friends that lives in the village goes to a different church, a much bigger church. Some would consider maybe a bit of a mega church in Bedford. And he one day turned to me and said, hey, how can I help? And I said, well, you know what? I'd love to really try and engage with the online community, not just in terms of putting services up, but doing something that follows on from that, but is maybe slightly more evangelistic, maybe slightly more connecting. And he said, well, hey, listen, why don't we just film some shorts? And he's pretty good with a camera. So he said, well, why don't we start filming small, 2-minute little shorts? And I said, okay, great. And so based on that, we started meeting on a weekly basis, and the 2-minute shorts was based on what the sermon may have been. So rather than doing a 20, 30-minute sermon, it was a 2-minute message, encouragement, challenge. And we started putting those up on our social media feeds and mainly focusing on our village. Like I said, we have 3 Facebook groups in the village. And we started seeing amazing engagement. Some who are, adamantly against any faith, and they would speak out against it. But that also enabled me and encouraged, it opened up a conversation with them. And also surprisingly saw other people from the community step up and speak into context, even as people that didn't have faith. And I hasten to add, nothing was ever too controversial. We were very much trying to keep it, simple, basic messages. But we also saw a lot of people stepping up and asking questions and saying, well, how can we be involved? So much so that we have also, I saw in the chat that a few of the churches have had different people connecting from across the world. We've been really blessed that we've had a few people from parts of the States, parts of India and Africa be in touch and say, hey, thank you so much for the way you're connecting with us. We've been blessed by it. And probably one of the moments that I was most wowed with was by a comment from the States where he had come back to know Jesus based on some of the things that we were doing here. And that is just one of those wow moments where you go, look at the global church coming together. And there's help out there. Rachel's just popped back on screen, which is time coming to an end. But I just want to encourage you really quickly before questions come to say that there is so many ways to get support and questions answered out there. Ben Elliott is on the call today, and he heads up something called the Church Comms Collective, which is a Facebook group. It's absolutely free. And it's an amazing resource for people just like you and me to ask questions. Hey, I want to do this. I don't know what camera to get. I don't know what cables to get. Opens up connections and conversation about that, about how we can be the church, not just do church, but be the church, even in the online hybrid context. Sorry, I will stop there.
No, not at all. Brilliant. I've just popped up, Adrian, just because I don't want you to go without us having a really quick fire few moments of just to post some questions to you, if that's all right. Really helpful to hear of your experience. Like we said, great to hear from Joe, brilliant to hear from Matt and Ken, but really helpful, I'm sure, for so many on this call to hear from a smaller local church perspective who doesn't have a big staff team or doesn't have employed workers and so on. How do we rally people? So I'm going to, it's all right, 3 or 4 quick fire questions for just a sentence each. Okay? First one would be exactly that. Coming from a small church context without the resources of employed or big staff team, from your experience, just in a line or two, what would you encourage people as to how to draw together volunteers, who to look for, who do you need on that team? How do you get going?
I think the biggest thing is looking for the people who are willing to serve, probably willing to learn something new. You have to be somewhat techie. So if you don't know how to use an iPad or a computer, they may not be the best person, but someone who's willing to say, hey, you know what? I can jump on YouTube. I've got some time to spare. And I want to learn some stuff. And how can you put me to work? And believe it or not, there are more, again, average age of our church is much older, but there are so many people who are like, hey, I'm willing to do it. And I think Joe shared that if you want to get technical, 90-year-olds are jumping onto iPads nowadays. So it is possible. It just, more than anything, it's a willing heart.
And absolutely, I think prior to this webinar today, Adrian, you shared with me how you yourself had taught yourself a few things by looking at YouTube or Google. What kind of things did you learn? What did you start looking for?
Well, I think one of the things that I kind of very quickly, and I learned from my mistakes, I started comparing myself to big churches, and I kind of started saying, wow, look at what they're doing, and can I do that? And that's too much. And I kind of said, well, hold on a second, stop. I don't need to do any of that. What is God asking for us in our context? And then started recognizing that there were some real basic things. And so when we decided to live stream, it was like, okay, what do I need? And Pro Church Tools, I mentioned, has some great videos. And one of them is the cheapest way to live stream your church. And it starts as simple as saying, grab your phone, just like you're doing right here. That's the cheapest way you can do it. Hook that up to your YouTube, hook that up to your Facebook, your whatever. And that's it. You're there. Now, if you want to advance from that, okay, this is the kind of gear that you need. And so I started doing some of that research as well as some of those in our church. And then there's, for software or anything like that, there's some free ones. Oftentimes we talk about the money things, but there's something called OBS, which is a free system which you can connect with. And it's just about, figuring out what it is you need, what it is you want to do, and going from there. Someone in the chat mentioned something about, how do we find resources for graphics and things like that? There are subscription-based ones, which you can go. Again, Nucleus is one of them, and there's all sorts of other things, but there's also places where you can do stuff for free. Canva is one of the greatest, I think, design resources available possibly, where you can not only get things for free where you can make as well, but it's not just static visuals, but also videos. You can do little countdowns, you can do little tiny messages, which you can do based on your sermons, based on your messages and how you want to connect with people. So and again, Church Comms Collective is a great place to ask some of those questions, because there's so much out there that we can really support one another with.
Brilliant. Some great advice. And thanks to those of you who are putting notes in the chat and links as well. It's really helpful to share the wealth with other people. A capacity question. As we know, this has been a really wearying time. Somebody put on one of the questions, if your tech team, like you said, it might be the 1 or 2, might be the 5 or 6, if they're just weary and tired from all that has already gone before, how do you keep your team going? And especially now looking ahead to this next season, the next 3-6 months?
Yeah, I think that's a big question for all of us. I mean, the reality is some of us are going to be going, oh, I'm just tired and can't even think of that. Mm-hmm. It's okay sometimes to say, you know what? Perhaps that can't happen this week. Or perhaps we have to do it differently. So if for some reason, we didn't have a tech team member show up, push come to shove, I can hit record on my phone on a Sunday morning and then put that up on our channels. I can still connect with people. For those in our church that don't have internet, we actually burn a CD or a DVD for those so they can hear or watch afterwards. There are ways that you can do that, but also think ahead of how you can make it as simple and easy as possible. The gentleman I mentioned from our church is, again, a bit of a researcher. So he kind of said, how can I create something that makes it really, really super simple? This system, which is great, but a bit complicated. And he bought literally this big remote, which has 4 little touch screens on it. So if for some reason nobody from the tech team can do it, or they all quit, I, with this thing from the pulpit, can go, okay, that camera goes live. And then those are my lyric screens, and that on this little thing. Now that takes research, and that takes, someone being able to think that, but building up some of those things to say, hey, take a few weeks off, breathe. Thank you so much. You've been such a blessing. But thinking ahead of those things, but also knowing what your own capacity is and being able to take a break with some of that as well.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Adrian. There's loads of other questions we could quiz you with, but unfortunately our time is up. But thank you for many of us grounding it in actually what it could look like for us in our church context. Like you said, being creative, being encouraging of the teams, seeking out the right people, and believing that God's got a plan for us, without comparing and contrasting to those around us, but seeking out what our community needs. So it's really encouraging. Thanks so much for your time, Adrian.
Thanks for having me.
Recording, people will be able to watch the recording, share it with their churches and teams if you want to. So God bless you. Thanks, Adrian. Folks, we're just drawing into a close now. Our time is nearly up, but we really hope that from the nuggets that have been shared by Joe, and our thanks to Joe, to Matt and to Ken, and also to Adrian, really hope that something has sparked your own thoughts, has consolidated where you're at, has hopefully encouraged you, or indeed do come back to us via myself or Ben or Rachel if there's further questions for follow-up. Just to remind you from here, we'd love this to be an ongoing dialogue. We'd love to help support and equip you for where you're at. As you said, just a little reminder, we've set a date for a second part 2, if you like, of heading into or edging into hybrid church. That date again for your diaries is Thursday the 20th of May at 2 p.m. till 3:30 p.m. So just a warm invitation to all of you to come and join us again, or please do suggest to other people if you think it would be helpful, and we'd love to see you then. So just to see us out and to pray a commissioning prayer over us at this time, I'm going to hand back to Rachel. God bless you. Thanks again for joining us. Rachel.
Thank you so much. I'm literally going to pray for us as we venture out on this huge mission opportunity, whether it be with a phone or a great system. God can use us, and he is using us to bring many people to meet Jesus at this time through going online. Father God, thank you so much this time together this afternoon. Father, thank you for all these amazing people. Lord, would you bless them as they go on mission, as they take the amazing good news of Jesus and we spread it to just so many places we couldn't have imagined going, because we can go online or on a telephone or in all the ways. Lord, make your church more imaginative than we could possibly have imagined we could be, more creative. Give us courage that we didn't think we had. Give us technical ability that we didn't dream of, and give us all the help that we need as we go forward. And I know many, many people come to know Jesus because of what happened when your church went online. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you on the 20th of May.
Thanks. Bye.
God bless. Thanks again. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.